Hello everyone, this is Mr. Tanner, and for this set of notes, we're going to be looking at Linnaean Classification. And what this really is a way of grouping organisms together by their common traits. Or at least that's really how it started in the 1700s when it was developed by Carl Linnaeus. So what Carl Linnaeus would do was he would look at organisms and he would see how similar their traits were. And based on those similarities, he would assign them to categories. And each rank would be more specific. So a high rank might be, fur. So lots of animals have fur. And then you could go down from there and you could divide animals with fur into carnivores and herbivores. So then it gets more specific and you've eliminated a large group of furred animals because a lot of them are either carnivores or herbivores, but most are not both. And evolutionarily, what we would call these similarities would be homologous traits. These would have been traits that organisms inherited from a common ancestor that had a similar trait. So again, I'll write that out. Original Linnaean classification relied on what we would now know as homologous traits. It's important to note that when Carl Linnaeus came up with this taxonomic system of grouping organisms, natural selection had not been discovered and evolution was an idea that was not accepted by anyone. Charles Darwin wouldn't publish his book until 1859, so almost 100 years later. And now when we group organisms, we still use the taxonomic ranks developed by Carl Linnaeus, but we also organize them evolutionarily and genetically. So we'll go into that more as we get there, but the system is different than it used to be, but the naming and the ranks are still exactly what Carl Linnaeus set up over 250 years ago. So let's go ahead and look at further into these notes. So to begin with, classifying organisms really began much earlier than this, but the modern system that we use today, at least the modern naming system, was developed by Carl Linnaeus. He lived from 1707 to 1778. And like I said, the naming system is still used to this day. However, many of the ways that we classify organisms have become more modern by using genetics and evolutionary history as well. The system is called Linnaean Taxonomy, and it organizes all living things into 8 taxonomic ranks. And we're going to look at those 8 taxonomic ranks on this later on in the notes. And by the time we get to the smallest taxonomic rank, which is a species, we're going to be down to a single organism because each new rank eliminates options. If you've ever played the game Guess Who, right, you ask a question about the other person's character and you hope to eliminate a large portion of the possible candidates. And that's the idea of these taxonomic ranks. Each time we go down a rank, fewer organisms match that category. And then we go down again and fewer still. And by the time we get to a species, the idea is that there's only one organism that fits that characteristic and we have a single species. In reality, sometimes we have to go a step down into a subspecies, and we're not going to go really into that, but there is some organisms that are subspecies of one another, like the domestic dog and the wolf. Their species is both Canis lupus. Their scientific name is Canis lupus, but for the domestic dog, they get a subspecies familiaris to differentiate them slightly. So let's take a look at those 8 taxonomic ranks. The broadest that fits the most thing is domain. And in fact, there's only 3 domains on Earth. And those are eukaryota, which we fall into. We have eukaryotic cells. Hopefully you remember that from our cells unit. There is archaea, which is a type of prokaryotic cell. Archaea cells, they're often called extremophiles. And then there's bacteria, which are also prokaryotic cells. So every single organism with a eukaryotic cell, which we have, falls into the domain eukaryota. Then we would drop down a taxonomic rank to kingdom. We would fall into the kingdom Animalia. There's also Plantae and Protista and Fungi. So there's actually 7 kingdoms. So there's more categories because fewer organisms fit into each category. Then we drop down to phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. And it's worth noting that the genus and species together form the scientific name. So for humans, our genus is Homo, and our species is sapiens. So our scientific name is Homo sapiens. I think we'd actually write the species as H. sapiens. You include the first letter of the genus in the species name. So our scientific name is Homo sapiens. Our species is H. sapiens. So let's apply these taxonomic ranks to our den animal, a grizzly bear. Remembering the taxonomic ranks can be a little bit tricky. I don't have one for domain. You just have to remember domain is the largest rank. But for the rest, I was always taught in school, I think it's a useful mnemonic to learn. Kings play chess on fine green silk. So if you can remember the phrase, kings play chess on fine green silk, it can help you place an order of kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And as you're taking these notes, you're also going to come up with your own mnemonic to help you remember these ranks. So let's look at the taxonomic ranks of a grizzly bear. Like I said, domain, humans are a part of this, so is grizzly bears. They are eukaryotes. So their domain is eukaryota. Grizzly bears are also animals, so they belong to the kingdom Animalia. Animals would include all mammals, all fish, all reptiles, all birds, all insects. So animals is a massive category of things that would, so massive types of species of organisms fit into the kingdom Animalia. When we drop down to our phylum, grizzly bears belong to Chordata. And this means that they have a spinal cord. So they are chordates. They have a spinal column. They have a cord. So this would eliminate from the animals things like octopi and worms, insects. These don't have spinal cords, but we would still have fish in here. We would still have reptiles and birds and mammals. So we're narrowing things down, but phylum is still a very large category. For our class in grizzly bears, they are Mammalia. So now that we're in Mammalia, we are talking only about mammals. We've eliminated fish and birds and reptiles and amphibians. We're looking at furred animals that usually give live birth and, most importantly, feed their young with milk. So that is what makes things mammals. Getting more specific, we go to the order Carnivora. Carnivora sounds a whole lot like they are a carnivore and they eat meat, but this is actually referring to the type of teeth that an animal has. So it's the type of teeth that would usually be used to eat meat. But as an example, a panda bear is also in the order Carnivora, and they only eat bamboo, which is obviously a plant. So panda bears still have those carnivorous-like teeth, so they belong to the order Carnivora. But this would eliminate any animal that has, flat-like molars that are mostly used for eating plants. So we're getting more specific still. The family for grizzly bears is Ursidae, which means we are now in the specificity of bears. Ursa means bear. Ursidae is the family of bears. Genus is Ursos, which is basically saying like it's a true bear. This is where we separate pandas from this list. Pandas are still bears because they're in the family Ursidae, but they're not in the same level of bear as like a grizzly bear or a black bear because they're not in the genus Ursus. And then the species is U. arctos. And that is the grizzly bear. They do also actually have a subspecies. The grizzly bear's subspecies is a fun one. It's horribilis. So it's like the terrible great bear, the horrible great bear is what this name essentially becomes. So that is how you can use these taxonomic ranks. And hopefully what you're seeing is every time we drop down this level, fewer organisms fit into those categories of life. So hopefully this helped you fill out your note sheet in the science notebook. And as always, thanks for watching.